"Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy but firm. "I'm Sheriff Grayson," he replied, tipping his hat respectfully. "And this is Amina. She has something to show you." The woman's gaze shifted to Amina, who timidly held out the crumpled piece of paper with the address written on it. The woman's expression softened instantly, and she reached out to take the note. As she read it, tears welled up in her eyes, and her hand trembled slightly. "Amina," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're here." Amina's eyes widened in surprise. Do I know you?" The woman nodded, stepping aside to let them inside. "Come in. There's much to explain." The interior of the house was dimly lit, with sunlight filtering through, cracks in the boarded up. In a small, sleepy town where everyone knew each other's name, life moved at its own unhurried pace. People greeted one another with warm smiles as they went about their daily routines, shopping at the farmer's market, sipping coffee at the corner cafe, or catching up on gossip at the local diner. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, something unusual caught the attention of several townsfolk who had stopped by the laundromat to wash their clothes. Sitting quietly in the corner of the dimly lit room was a young black girl no older than 10. Her presence stood out not because she seemed out of place, but because no one recognized her. In a town where faces were as familiar as the seasons, strangers were rare, and curiosity often got the better of people. Amina sat cross-legged on the cold-tiled floor, her backpack resting beside her like a faithful companion. She wore a faded hoodie that looked slightly too big for her small frame and jeans patched with threadbare fabric. Her dark hair was pulled back into 2 neat braids tied with mismatched ribbons. Despite the hum of washing machines and dryers whirring around her, Amina remained still, almost statue-like, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her hands. The first person to notice her was Mrs. Harper, an elderly woman known for her sharp eyes and sharper tongue. As she loaded her whites into machine No. 7, she glanced over at Amina and frowned. "Who's that child?" she muttered under her breath, though loud enough for those nearby to hear. Soon, others began stealing glances too. Mr. Peterson, the retired mechanic, pretended to inspect his detergent bottle while sneaking peeks at the mysterious girl. Even teenagers scrolling through their phones paused long enough to wonder why such a young girl would be alone in a laundromat during school hours. Despite all the curious stares, Amina didn't look up. Instead, she stared intently at the slip of paper in her hand, mouthing words silently to herself. It was clear she wasn't there to do laundry. There were no baskets or piles of clothes near her. Whatever brought her here clearly weighed heavily on her mind. As whispers filled the air, Deputy Clara Monroe walked in, responding to a call from Mrs. Harper, who had phoned the sheriff's office claiming there was something suspicious about the girl. Clara, a kind-hearted woman with a reputation for fairness, immediately spotted Amina sitting quietly in the corner. She approached cautiously, crouching down so she could meet the girl's gaze. "Hey there," Clara said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "What's your name?" For the first time since arriving, Amina raised her head. Her large brown eyes locked onto Clara's, searching for something, perhaps kindness, perhaps safety. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. "I'm Amina," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of spinning washers. Clara nodded gently. "Nice to meet you, Amina. Are you waiting for someone?" Amina hesitated, before shaking her head. Then, after a moment's pause, she held out the crumpled piece of paper toward Clara. On it was a single address written in shaky handwriting. Confused but intrigued, Clara took the note and studied it closely. Something about it tugged at her heartstrings, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Before she could ask more questions, Amina added quietly, "My mom told me to come here if anything happened." The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Clara's instincts kicked in, sensing that this was far more than just a lost child looking for help. Little did she, or anyone else in the laundromat, know how deeply intertwined Amina's story was with the history of their quiet little town. And as Clara reached for her radio to alert Sheriff Grayson, she couldn't shake the feeling that uncovering the truth behind Amina's arrival would change them all forever. This sets the stage for mystery, empathy, and emotional depth, drawing readers into Amina's world while leaving them eager to learn more about her journey. Sheriff Grayson was a man of routine. Every morning he'd sip his black coffee while reviewing reports at his desk, and every afternoon he'd patrol the town to ensure everything was in order. But today, that routine was interrupted by Clara's urgent call over the radio. Her voice had been calm but carried an undertone of concern that made him sit up straighter. "Sheriff, we've got a situation at the laundromat," Clara said. "There's a young girl here, alone, and she's saying something about her mom sending her somewhere. It's complicated." Without hesitation, Sheriff Grayson grabbed his hat and headed out the door. He didn't need details to know this wasn't just another minor issue. Clara wouldn't have called him unless it felt serious. As he drove through the quiet streets toward the laundromat, memories began to surface. Memories of his own childhood, when life seemed simpler but also harder in ways he rarely spoke about. When he arrived, the parking lot outside the laundromat was unusually crowded. Word had spread quickly among the townsfolk, and a small group had gathered near the entrance, murmuring amongst themselves. Some looked concerned, others curious, and a few appeared downright suspicious. Ignoring their stares, Sheriff Grayson stepped inside, his tall frame commanding attention as soon as he entered. Clara stood beside Amina, who remained seated on the floor, clutching her backpack tightly. The sheriff nodded at Clara before kneeling, down to Amina's level. His movements were deliberate, careful not to startle her. "Hi there," he said. His deep voice softened with warmth. "I'm Sheriff Grayson. Can you tell me your name?" Amina hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Amina." "Well, Amina, I hear you might be looking for some help. Is that right?" She nodded slowly, her eyes flickering between the sheriff and Clara. Then, without saying anything, she held out the crumpled piece of paper again, the same one she had shown Clara earlier. Sheriff Grayson took the note and unfolded it carefully. The address written on it sent a jolt through him. It wasn't unfamiliar, in fact, it belonged to an old house on the outskirts of town, a place long abandoned and shrouded in local legend. For years, people avoided going near it, claiming it brought bad luck or worse. "What does this mean, Amina?" he asked gently, trying to keep his tone light despite the unease growing in his chest. "My mom said if anything happened, I should go there," Amina replied, her voice trembling slightly. "She told me someone would take care of me." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the washing machine seemed quieter now, as though holding its breath along with everyone else. Sheriff Grayson exchanged a glance with Clara, whose expression mirrored his own confusion and concern. They both knew what the address meant, or rather, what it used to mean, but neither could understand why a child would be sent there. Deciding to focus on immediate needs, the sheriff turned back to Amina. "Do you know where your mom is now?" Her lip quivered and tears welled up in her eyes. She shook her head. "I don't know. She left last night. She said she had to fix something important, but she hasn't come back." The simplicity of her words struck a chord deep within Sheriff Grayson. He remembered being a boy, waiting for answers that never came, feeling lost and powerless. His heart ached for Amina, who seemed so small yet brave amidst uncertainty. "We're going to figure this out together, okay?" he promised, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But first, let's get you somewhere safe and warm." As he helped Amina stand up, whispers erupted around them. Mrs. Harper pushed forward, her arms crossed. "What's going on, Sheriff? Who is this girl?" "That's none of your business right now," Clara interjected firmly, stepping between Amina and the crowd. "Let us handle this." Reluctantly, the onlookers backed off, though their curiosity lingered like storm clouds overhead. Outside, Sheriff Grayson guided Amina into his patrol car, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. As they drove away from the laundromat, he couldn't shake the feeling that unraveling the mystery behind the address and Amina's story would force him to confront parts of himself he'd tried to leave in the past. For now, though, his priority was clear: protecting this frightened little girl and finding out what, or who, was waiting for her at that old house. This part builds tension and emotional connection, drawing readers deeper into the unfolding mystery while highlighting the sheriff's protective instincts and personal history. The drive to the outskirts of town was quiet, save for the soft hum of the patrol car's engine and the occasional rustle of Amina, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. Sheriff Grayson glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with concern. She stared out the window, her small hands gripping the edge of the blanket tightly as though it were a lifeline keeping her grounded. As they approached their destination, the landscape shifted dramatically. The neat rows of houses gave way to overgrown fields and crumbling fences. Trees loomed like silent sentinels along the narrow dirt road, their branches twisting toward the gray afternoon sky. At the end of the path stood the old house, a weathered structure that seemed frozen in time. Its once white paint had peeled away, leaving behind patches of faded wood. Broken shutters hung crookedly from the windows, and the front porch sagged under years of neglect. Sheriff Grayson parked the car, a short distance away, not wanting to startle whoever or whatever might be inside. He stepped out and opened the back door for Amina, extending his hand to help her out. "Stay close to me," he said gently, his voice steady despite the unease prickling at the edges of his mind. Amina nodded, clutching her backpack against her chest as she followed him up the creaky steps to the porch. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and decay, adding to the eerie atmosphere. When they reached the front door, the sheriff hesitated before knocking firmly. For a moment, there was no response. Then faint shuffling sounds came from within, followed by the unmistakable creak of floorboards. The door slowly swung open, revealing an elderly woman standing in the shadows. Her silver hair was tied back into a loose bun, and her face bore deep lines etched by time and hardship. She wore a simple dress that looked decades out of style, but her eyes, sharp and piercing, held a wisdom that transcended age. Windows. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, and the scent of old books and forgotten memories filled the room. In the center of the living area stood a small table covered with photographs and letters. Many of the pictures featured a younger version of the woman alongside a man who bore a striking resemblance to Sheriff Grayson. "This can't be," the sheriff murmured, staring at one of the photos in disbelief. "It is," the woman said softly, turning to face him. "I'm your Aunt Evelyn. This house belonged to your grandparents, and to hers." She gestured toward Amina, whose confusion mirrored the sheriff's own. Evelyn explained that Amina's mother, Naomi, had grown up in this very house. Years ago, Naomi had left town under difficult circumstances, vowing never to return unless absolutely necessary. But before she left, she entrusted Evelyn with instructions. If anything ever happened to her, Amina was to come here for safety. "She knew I'd protect her," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just as I promised your grandmother, I'd watch over all of us." Sheriff Grayson felt the weight of history pressing down on him. His family had ties to this place he'd long forgotten, or perhaps chosen to forget. And now, fate had brought him back here, standing beside a frightened little girl who carried pieces of his past in her tiny hands. But one question remained unanswered. Where was Naomi? And why hadn't she returned for her daughter? As Evelyn wrapped Amina in a warm embrace, Sheriff Grayson realized this mystery was far from over, and uncovering the truth would require confronting secrets buried deeper than anyone imagined. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the old house, Evelyn ushered Sheriff Grayson and Amina into the living room. The air was heavy with questions, but there was also a sense of fragile hope, as though the answers they sought were just within reach. Evelyn moved to the table cluttered with photographs and letters, her hands trembling slightly as she sifted through the pile. She pulled out an envelope that looked older than the rest, its edges worn and yellowed with time. On the front, written in neat cursive, were 2 words: "For Amina." "This arrived months ago," Evelyn explained, holding the letter carefully. "Naomi sent it to me, knowing I'd need it if you ever came here." Her gaze softened as she handed the envelope to Amina. "It's from your mother." Amina froze, her fingers hovering over the letter before finally taking it. For a moment, she simply stared at it as if afraid to open it. Tears welled up in her eyes and she glanced at Sheriff Grayson, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay," he said gently. "Take your time." With a deep breath, Amina carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her lips moved silently as she read the words, her expression shifting between confusion, sadness, and something resembling relief. Sheriff Grayson exchanged a glance with Evelyn, who stood nearby, watching Amina with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Finally, Amina looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "She says she had to leave because someone was after her. Someone bad." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. "After her?" Sheriff Grayson asked, leaning forward slightly. "Did she say who? Or why?" Amina shook her head, clutching the letter tightly. "She didn't write their name, but she said they wanted something she has, and that she couldn't let them find her. That's why she told me to come here if anything happened." Evelyn sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping as though carrying an invisible burden. "I feared this day would come," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "Naomi always knew trouble followed her. Even when she was little, she carried secrets too big for one person to bear." Sheriff Grayson frowned, his mind racing. What kind of secrets? And why didn't anyone step in to help her sooner? Evelyn hesitated, glancing at Amina before answering. "Some things are better left buried, but not anymore. Not now." She turned to face him fully, her piercing gaze unwavering. "Your grandparents weren't just farmers, Grayson. They were protectors, guardians of something valuable hidden right here in this town. Something dangerous people have been searching for decades." The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. He had grown up hearing fragments of stories about his family's past, but he'd dismissed them as nothing more than tall tales meant to entertain children. Now he wondered how much of it was true, and how much danger they were all in. Before he could press further, Amina spoke again, her voice small but steady. "Mom wrote one more thing. She said I should trust you two, and that you'd know what to do next. Trust." The word hung heavily in the air, a fragile thread connecting them all. Sheriff Grayson knelt beside Amina, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together, Amina. Whatever your mom was protecting you from, we'll make sure you're safe." But even as he spoke those words, doubt lingered in his mind. Protecting Amina meant confronting forces he didn't yet understand, and facing truths about his own family that might change everything he thought he knew. As night fell outside, wrapping the old house in darkness, the three of them sat together, under the flickering light of a single lamp. Evelyn began sharing pieces of the puzzle, secrets tied to the land, the house, and the legacy Naomi had fought so hard to shield. And somewhere deep inside, Sheriff Grayson felt the first stirrings of resolve. This wasn't just about solving a mystery anymore. It was about honoring a promise. To his family, to Naomi, and most importantly, to the brave little girl sitting beside him. The room grew quieter as Evelyn's voice filled the space, weaving together fragments of a story that had been buried for decades. Her words painted a picture of a town far more complex than anyone realized, a place where secrets ran deep and danger lurked beneath the surface. "Your grandparents didn't just farm this land," Evelyn continued, her tone steady but tinged with urgency. "They were guardians of something ancient, something powerful. People came from miles away seeking it, believing it could change their lives or destroy them." Sheriff Grayson listened intently, his brow furrowed in disbelief. He had always thought his family's legacy was rooted in hard work and simple living. To hear that there was more, something tied to mystery and peril, felt like stepping into another world entirely. "What exactly were they protecting?" he asked, his voice low but laced with curiosity. Evelyn hesitated, glancing at Amina before answering. "A map. An old map etched onto stone, hidden somewhere on this property. It leads to, well, no one really knows what lies at the end of it. but those who seek it believe it holds unimaginable power. Amina's eyes widened. Is that why Mom left? Because someone wanted the map? Evelyn nodded gravely. Naomi knew about the map since she was a child. She swore she'd never tell anyone its location. Not even me. And when trouble started, closing in, she disappeared to keep it safe. Sheriff Grayson leaned back, processing everything. So whoever is after Naomi now, they're probably looking for Amina too, thinking she knows where the map is. It's likely, Evelyn admitted. Which means we can't stay here long. This house isn't safe anymore. As if on cue, a faint sound outside broke the silence, a twig snapping underfoot. Everyone froze, their hearts pounding. Sheriff. Grayson stood quickly, moving toward the window to peer out cautiously. The yard appeared empty, but the hair on the back of his neck stood up. They weren't alone. We need to find the map before they do, Evelyn said firmly. If we don't, none of us will be safe, not you, not Amina, and certainly not Naomi. But how? Amina asked, clutching her backpack tightly. Mom didn't say anything. About a map. Evelyn's gaze softened. She wouldn't have, not directly, but she left clues. For you. Reaching into the folds of her dress, Evelyn pulled out a small brass key attached to a worn leather cord. This belonged to your mother. She gave it to me years ago, saying it would unlock something important someday. I think it's time we found out what. Sheriff Grayson watched as Evelyn led them to a corner of the living room where an old bookshelf stood against the wall. She knelt down and began inspecting the wooden planks carefully until she found what she was looking for, a tiny keyhole hidden behind a loose panel. This must be it, she whispered, inserting the key and turning it slowly. With a soft click, the bookshelf shifted slightly, revealing a narrow doorway carved into the wall. The air that drifted out was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and age. Amina stepped forward hesitantly, peering into the darkness beyond. What's down there? I don't know, Evelyn replied honestly. But whatever it is, it's part of your mother's plan, and maybe our only chance to protect you. Sheriff Grayson grabbed a flashlight from his belt and handed it to Amina. Stay close, he instructed, his voice firm but gentle. We'll go together. One by one, they descended into the hidden passageway, leaving behind the dim light of the living room. Each step echoed softly in the narrow tunnel, amplifying the weight of what lay ahead. At the end of the passage, they found themselves in a small underground chamber. In the center stood a pedestal made of stone, and resting atop it was a rectangular slab engraved with intricate symbols. The map. Evelyn breathed, her voice trembling with awe. But as they approached, a sudden noise above ground sent chills down their spines. Footsteps, multiple pairs, were drawing closer to the house. They're here, Sheriff Grayson muttered, gripping Amina's hand tightly. Time was running out. If they wanted to survive and uncover the truth, they'd have to act fast. The sound of heavy boots thudding against the wooden floorboards above sent a jolt of panic through the chamber. Sheriff Grayson's mind raced as he glanced between the map on the pedestal, Amina's frightened face, and Evelyn's determined expression. There was no time to waste. They had to move, and they had to move now. Take the map, Evelyn urged, her voice low but urgent. It's the only way to protect Amina and ourselves. Sheriff Grayson hesitated for a moment, torn between caution and action. But when another loud creak echoed from upstairs, he knew there was no room for doubt. He carefully lifted the stone slab, wrapping it in a piece of cloth Evelyn handed him from her pocket. This will slow them down, Evelyn added, pulling a lever hidden in the wall near the entrance of the chamber. Instantly, the narrow passageway behind them began to shift. The walls groaned as parts of the tunnel collapsed inward, sealing off their escape route. What about you? Amina asked, her voice trembling as she clutched Evelyn's arm. Evelyn smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'll hold them off long enough for you two to get away. This house has more secrets than even I know. You'll find another way out. Before either Amina or the sheriff could protest, Evelyn pushed them gently toward a second exit at the far end of the chamber. Go, now. Reluctantly, Sheriff Grayson took Amina's hand and led her into the dark passage. Behind them, they heard muffled voices shouting upstairs, followed by the unmistakable crash of wood splintering as the intruders broke through the front door. The tunnel twisted and turned, its uneven floor making every step precarious. Amina stumbled once, but the sheriff caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm yet reassuring grip. We're almost there, he whispered, shining the flashlight ahead. At the end of the passage, a faint glimmer of moonlight filtered through cracks in what appeared to be an old storm cellar door. Pushing it open cautiously, they emerged into the cool night air, surrounded by tall grass and towering trees. The sheriff scanned the area, ensuring the coast was clear before helping Amina climb out fully. We need to keep moving, he said, his voice tense. They'll figure out we're gone soon enough. As they hurried through the woods, the distant shouts of men grew louder, echoing through the stillness of the night. Amina clung to the sheriff's side, her small frame shaking not just from fear but also from exhaustion. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely audible. To somewhere safe, he replied firmly. Somewhere they won't think to look. His mind raced as he tried to piece together their next move. Returning to town wasn't an option, not with strangers already prowling around. Instead, he guided Amina toward an abandoned cabin deep in the forest, a place he'd discovered during his teenage years. It was secluded, forgotten, and most importantly, secure. When they finally reached the cabin, Sheriff Grayson ushered Amina inside, barricading the door with whatever furniture remained. He then set the wrapped map on a dusty table, studying it under the dim glow of his flashlight. It's a start, he muttered, tracing the engraved symbols with his fingers. But we need to figure out where this leads, and fast. Amina sat quietly nearby, hugging her knees to her chest. Despite everything, she managed a small, brave smile. Mom trusted us to do this. We can't let her down. Her words struck a chord deep within the sheriff. He nodded, determination hardening his features. No matter what happens next, he promised, we're finishing this, for your mom, for Evelyn, and for everyone counting on us. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of danger closing in. But inside the cabin, hope burned brightly, a fragile flame fueled by courage and resolve. The cabin was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of an old clock that had somehow survived the years. Sheriff Grayson sat at the table, his eyes fixed on the map as he tried to decipher its cryptic symbols. Amina watched him intently, her exhaustion giving way to a quiet determination. She knew they were running out of time. Every passing second brought their pursuers closer. We need help, the sheriff said finally, breaking the silence. This map, it's more than just directions. It's a puzzle, and we can't solve it alone. But who can we trust? Amina asked softly, her voice tinged with worry. They'll follow us anywhere. He nodded, understanding her fear. Then, after a moment of thought, realization dawned in his eyes. There's one person left, he said firmly. Someone who knows this town and its secrets better than anyone else. Amina tilted her head curiously. Who? Clara, he replied. She's smart, resourceful, and loyal. If anyone can help us make sense of this, it's her. Without wasting another moment, Sheriff Grayson grabbed his radio and called Clara, explaining only what she needed to know. They were safe for now, but needed her expertise urgently. Within the hour, Clara arrived at the cabin, her face pale but resolute as she stepped inside. What have you gotten yourselves into? She asked, though her tone carried no accusation, only concern. When the sheriff showed her the map, her sharp gaze immediately picked up details he'd missed. These markings, they're coordinates, she said, pointing to specific symbols etched onto the stone. But not just any coordinates. They match locations tied to your family's history. Grayson frowned. How do you know that? Because I've seen them before. In old records at the sheriff's office, your grandparents documented these sites decades ago, calling them Guardian points. Amina leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. What are guardian points? They're landmarks, Clara explained. Places meant to protect whatever lies at the end of this trail. Each site holds a clue or key needed to unlock the next step. Realization washed over Sheriff Grayson. So Naomi didn't leave the map unprotected. She made sure whoever found it would have to earn the right to use it. Clara nodded. Exactly. And if we want to stay ahead of those chasing you, we'll need to move quickly. Every location is a potential trap or salvation. With renewed purpose, the trio set out under the cover of darkness, following the first set of coordinates to an ancient oak tree deep in the woods. Beneath its gnarled roots, they unearthed a small metal box containing a journal written by Grayson's grandfather. Its pages revealed fragments of wisdom about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of protecting others, even at great personal cost. As they moved from one guardian point to the next, the pieces began falling into place. At each stop, they uncovered tools, riddles, and warnings that guided them closer to their final destination. A hidden valley nestled beyond the hills surrounding the town. By the time they reached the valley, dawn was breaking, painting the horizon in hues of gold and pink. There, beneath a crumbling stone archway, they found Naomi, weak but alive. She had been hiding, waiting for someone trustworthy to find her. I knew you'd come, she whispered to Amina, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her daughter. For Sheriff Grayson, the journey had changed him. He realized his family's legacy wasn't about power or secrets. It was about love, protection, and standing up for what was right. Together, they vowed to safeguard the valley and ensure its mysteries remained untouched by greed. As the sun rose higher, casting light over their weary but hopeful faces, they knew they had done something extraordinary, not just for themselves, but for generations to come.